For the house of Israel hath tried their God. And when they had ceased speaking, Holofernes commanded his servants that attended in his tent to take Achior, and bring him to the children of Ammon. So they took him, and brought him before the face of the children of Ammon. And Holofernes said unto him, Go to, and tell this people, what are these people that abide in the hill country? Or what are the cities that they inhabit? Or what is the multitude of their army? And wherein is their power and strength, and what king is set over them, or captain of their army? And why have they determined not to come and meet me, more than all the inhabitants of the west? Then said Achior, the captain of all the sons of Ammon, Let my lord now hear a word from the mouth of thy servant, and I will declare unto thee the truth concerning this people, which dwelleth near thee, and inhabiteth the hill countries, and there shall no lie come out of the mouth of thy servant. This people are descended of the Chaldeans, and they sojourned heretofore in Mesopotamia, because they would not follow the gods of their fathers, which were in the land of Chaldea. For they left the way of their ancestors, and worshipped the God of heaven, the God whom they knew, so they cast them out from the face of their gods, and they fled into Mesopotamia, and sojourned there many days. Then their God commanded them to depart from the place where they sojourned, and to go into the land of Canaan where they dwelt, and were increased with gold and silver, and with very much cattle. But when a famine covered all the land of Canaan, they went down into Egypt, and sojourned there, while they were nourished, and became there a great multitude, so that one could not number their nation. Therefore the king of Egypt rose up against them, and dealt subtilly with them, and brought them low with labouring in brick, and made them slaves. Then they cried unto their God, and he smote all the land of Egypt with incurable plagues, so the Egyptians cast them out of their sight. And God dried the Red Sea before them, and brought them to Mount Sinai, and Cade's barn, and cast forth all that dwelt in the wilderness. So they dwelt in the land of the Amorites, and they destroyed by their strength all them of Esabon, and passing over Jordan they possessed all the hill country. And they cast forth before them the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Jebusite, and the Sychemite, and all the Gergesites, and they dwelt in that country many days. And whilst they sinned not before their God, they prospered, because the God that hateth iniquity was with them. But when they departed from the way which he appointed them, they were destroyed in many battles very sore, and were led captives into a land that was not theirs, and the temple of their God was cast to the ground, and their cities were taken by the enemies. But now are they returned to their God, and are come up from the places where they were scattered, and have possessed Jerusalem, where their sanctuary is, and are seated in the hill country, for it was desolate. Now therefore, my lord and governor, if there be any error against this people, and they sin against their God, let us consider that this shall be their ruin, and let us go up, and we shall overcome them. But if there be no iniquity in their nation, let my lord now pass by, lest their Lord defend them, and their God be for them, and we become a reproach before all the world. So they sent ambassadors unto him to treat of peace, saying, Behold, we the servants of Nebuchadnezzar the great king lie before thee, use us, as shall be good in thy sight. Behold, our houses and all our places, and all our fields of wheat, and flocks, and herds, and all the lodges of our tents lie before thy face, use them as it pleaseth thee. Behold, even our cities and the inhabitants thereof are thy servants, come and deal with them as seemeth good unto thee. So the men came to Holofernes, and declared unto him after this manner. Then came he down toward the sea coast, both he and his army, and set garrisons in the high cities, and took out of them chosen men for aid. So they in all the country round about received them with garlands, with dances, and with timbrels. Yet he did cast down their frontiers, and cut down their groves, for he had decreed to destroy all the gods of the land, that all nations should worship Nebuchadnezzar only, and that all tongues and tribes should call upon him as God. Also he came over against Esdraelon near unto Judea, over against the great strait of Judea. And he pitched between Geba and Sethopolis, and there he tarried a whole month, that he might gather together all the carriages of his army. Now the children of Israel that dwelt in Judea heard all that Holofernes the chief captain of Nebuchadnezzar king of the Assyrians had done to the nations, and after what manner he had spoiled all their temples, and brought them to naught. Therefore they were exceedingly afraid of him, and were troubled for Jerusalem, and for the temple of the Lord their God, for they were newly returned from the captivity, and all the people of Judea were lately gathered together, and the vessels, and the altar, and the house, were sanctified after the profanation. Therefore they sent into all the coasts of Samaria, and the villages, and to Bethoron, and Belmen, and Jericho, and to Choba, and Isora, and to the valley of Salem, and possessed themselves beforehand of all the tops of the high mountains, and fortified the villages that were in them, and laid up victuals for the provision of war, for their fields were of late reaped. Also Joacim the high priest, which was in those days in Jerusalem, wrote to them that dwelt in Bethulia, and Betomastem, which is over against Eastraelon toward the open country, near to Dathaim, charging them to keep the passages of the hill country, for by them there was an entrance into Judea, and it was easy to stop them that would come up, because the passage was straight, for 2 men at the most. And the children of Israel did as Joacim the high priest had commanded them, with the ancients of all the people of Israel, which dwelt at Jerusalem. Then every man of Israel cried to God with great fervency, and with great fervency did they humble their souls, both they, and their wives, and their children, and their cattle, and every stranger and hireling, and their servants bought with money, put sackcloth upon their loins. Thus every man and women, and the little children, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, fell before the temple, and cast ashes upon their heads, and spread out their sackcloth before the face of the Lord. Also they put sackcloth about the altar, and cried to the God of Israel, all with one consent earnestly, that he would not give their children for a prey, and their wives for a spoil, and the cities of their inheritance to destruction, and the sanctuary to profanation and reproach, and for the nations to rejoice at. So God heard their prayers, and looked upon their afflictions, for the people fasted many days in all Judea and Jerusalem before the sanctuary of the Lord Almighty. And Joacim the high priest, and all the priests that stood before the Lord, and they which ministered unto the Lord, had their loins girt with sackcloth, and offered the daily burnt offerings, with the vows and free gifts of the people, and had ashes on their mitres, and cried unto the Lord with all their power, that he would look upon all the house of Israel graciously.